Hey there, viewers. Charter schools are supposed to be about opportunity and growth, but what's just been uncovered about Diddy's school tells a much darker story. This new discovery isn't just unsettling, it's terrifying, and it raises serious questions about what was really going on. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Custodian's Hour. It was just me and the mop bucket again, rolling down that third-floor hallway like I'd done 1,000 times before. The lights overhead buzzed the way they always do when no one's around. Too quiet to notice during the day, loud enough to make you think at night. I started at the far end by room 3F, dragging the mop in wide, slow arcs, watching the dirty water ripple in the bucket like it was trying to talk back. At 67, I still had my rhythm. You don't clean a place for 9 years and not learn the right way to move through it. My knees ain't what they used to be, but they know these floors like they know prayer. Capital Prep opened in 2016, and I've been here since day one. They called me Mr. Glenn back then, before most of the teachers cycled out and the principal changed so many times I stopped trying to learn names. It used to feel like a real school. Banners with big gold letters. News crews doing stories on celebrity-led education reform. Sean Combs, or Diddy, whatever he wanted to be called, came through once in a black car with some cameras following him. I didn't meet him or nothing, but I remember the way the students were told to line up and clap like they meant it. They practiced clapping. Isn't that something? Anyway, the school changed, got quieter, colder, not just the air. I mean the feeling. Students stopped smiling, teachers whispered more. The whole place stopped looking you in the eye. That night it was around 8:15. I had just finished the second floor when one of the admin staff, some intern-looking kid with a badge that said Compliance Oversight Assistant, stopped me in the stairwell. Said they needed the third-floor storage closet emptied for archival review. I told him I didn't have a key for that room. I never had. It'd been locked since the year we opened. He looked confused, like that was the wrong answer. Then he pulled out a key, didn't even look like one of ours, and handed it to me. Said, "Just tonight, you'll be compensated." Then he walked off. I didn't ask questions. I'd learned not to. I pocketed the key and kept on up. The third floor was dead quiet. No teachers, no staff. Just the echo of my steps and that occasional flicker from the light near the exit sign. The storage closet was at the far end, across from the old science room that nobody used anymore. I'd passed that door for years, always wondering what was behind it. The brass handle had tarnished over time, and someone had scribbled a faint spiral into the wood. Looked like marker, but old, faded like it didn't want to be seen. The key turned smoother than I expected. The door groaned open. I stood there a moment before turning on the light. It smelled like old paper and mold. Heavy, the kind of smell that stays in your clothes even after you shower. Shelves lined the walls, half-rotted wooden planks sagging under boxes. Some had collapsed entirely, their contents spilled out into piles of dusty folders, loose envelopes, and what looked like foam-padded VHS containers. I stepped inside, careful where I put my boots. The floor creaked but held. One box, right near the door, had Cap 16, internal D support material, scrawled across it in thick black marker. The tape had peeled off one edge. I crouched down, popped the lid. Inside were old memos, disciplinary reports, copies of orientation scripts. One page caught my eye. A staff schedule with a name I hadn't seen in years. Miss Randall. She vanished back in 2017. Didn't say goodbye. One morning she was just gone, and a new teacher had taken her place the next day. Nobody ever talked about it. I remember asking the office once and getting a polite nod and she moved on, but her desk still had her glasses sitting on it for a week. I moved deeper in, stepping over a pile of envelopes, all addressed to the school board. Dozens of them, some unopened, all dated between 2016 and 2019. One had dried water damage along the edge, like someone tried to hide it in a flood. Then I saw it. An exam sheet lying half-folded beneath a stack of manila folders. It had a name scribbled out in red pen, but what made my stomach turn was the corner, a spiral drawn in black ink, but the center was smudged with something dark, something that flaked when I touched it. Blood. Had to be. No one uses red ink that thick. The paper felt stiff. Wrong. Like it had dried out in fear. I was about to toss it into the trash bag when I noticed a heavy black case wedged in a broken crate. I tugged it out and blew off the dust. The sticker on it read, Cycle 2, Session 5, Do Not Review. That's what it said. Like someone knew you'd find it and dared you anyway. I don't know why I pocketed it. Something about the way it felt. Cold, heavy, like it wanted to be watched but also didn't. I didn't finish cleaning the room. Something about that space made my ribs tight, like the walls were watching me. I locked it back up, put the key in my pocket, and wheeled my cart down to the security office to log out for the night. Walking home felt longer than usual. Harlem at night has its own rhythm. Cars humming, music spilling out of windows, the occasional siren in the distance. But that night, every noise sounded farther away, like I'd slipped into some kind of echo chamber. I kept my hand in my pocket, holding onto that tape like it was a stone, weighing me down. At home, I put it on the counter. I stared at it for a long while. I don't even own a VHS player anymore. Who does? I told myself I'd figure it out later, but when I finally turned off the lights and got into bed, that's when the dream started. I was back in the school, not like it is now, but how it used to be. Clean floors, bright hallways, banners in every room, students lined up at their desks, silent, staring straight ahead. A low hum came from the intercom system, just static, but it sounded like breathing. The lights flickered in a rhythm. Every time they flashed, one of the students disappeared, but their desks stayed. And I heard footsteps, slow, dragging. Something heavy moved past me, but I couldn't turn my head. I wanted to scream, but my mouth stayed shut like someone was holding it closed from inside. The last thing I remember before waking was a girl in a red hoodie standing in the doorway. She didn't blink. She mouthed a word I didn't understand. I think it started with an R. I woke up sweating. The city noises were back. My room was normal, but when I looked at my work pants draped over the chair, the key to the storage closet was gone. The next morning I went in early. I had to check, had to see if the door was still open. I walked straight up to the third floor before the students came in, my heart pounding the whole way. But the door was sealed again. Not just locked, taped with yellow caution striping like there'd been a fire. A sign read, Under Facilities Review, Do Not Enter. I reached into my pocket for the key, but it wasn't there. Instead, the same envelope I saw spilled on the floor last night was tucked into my cart tray. Clean now. No mold, no address, just one word written across the front. Remember. I looked down the hallway. No one was there. Chapter 2, The Tape. I didn't touch the thing all day. Left it sitting there on the kitchen counter like a threat. The kind of thing you don't want to open but can't throw away either. Like a letter with no stamp. A name carved into the back of your head. I'd cleaned my kitchen 3 times just trying to ignore it. The tape sat right next to the dish rack, black and square and heavier than it should have been. I didn't even want to touch it with my bare hands, to be honest. It had that same label staring up at me. Cycle 2, Session 5, Do Not Review. Like someone was mocking me for not knowing what it meant. The sticker was peeling on one corner. The glue dried out from years in storage. The tape itself smelled faintly like dust and plastic, like old church hymnals and forgotten birthday balloons. I didn't own a VHS player anymore. Last time I used one was probably 2002, but my cousin Deshaun, who runs a junk clear-out service in Queens, had all kinds of crap in his storage unit. Called him up and asked if he had a player. Told him I needed it for a project. He didn't ask what kind. 3 hours later, I was elbow-deep in wires and dust, fiddling with the back of a beat-up combo player that still had a Blockbuster sticker on the bottom. Took me a few tries to get the picture to come through. The screen flickered green and purple at first, then dipped into a thick static. When the image finally settled, it showed a classroom. No title card, no opening tone, just a dim shot of a classroom I didn't recognize. The room was labeled Observation Room 6 in the bottom right corner. The image looked like it had been recorded through glass, maybe a two-way mirror, the angle tilted just enough to make everything look slightly off. The lighting inside was low and yellow, like it came from old industrial bulbs, not school fluorescents. The paint on the walls was flaking in thin curls, and the windows were completely blacked out with what looked like cardboard. 5 desks. 5 kids. None of them moved. They just sat there, hands flat on their desks, faces forward, no blinking, no shifting, not even a scratch or a sigh. I couldn't tell how old they were. Middle school maybe, but they wore the old Capitol Prep uniforms from the early years. That gray vest with the gold patch and the navy tie. Uniforms they stopped issuing after 2019. The room didn't feel like a classroom. It felt like a set. Then the door opened. A man walked in. His suit was too crisp for a skull. Charcoal gray with a black tie and polished shoes that didn't make a sound on the tile. His face, God, his face was wrong, blurred like a digital smear. Like someone took a pixel eraser and dragged it across where his eyes and mouth should have been. But the blur moved even when he stood still, like it had its own pulse. He didn't speak, just stood near the board and turned slightly to face the students. None of them reacted, but after maybe 30 seconds, one of the students, girl, far left, started crying. Not sobbing, no noise. Tears just fell from her face, perfectly straight, no head movement, no shaking, her shoulders didn't twitch. She didn't wipe them away. And in the background, the teacher. I hadn't noticed her at first. She was standing in the corner behind the filing cabinet, just whispering, over and over the same string of words I couldn't quite make out. The audio was garbage, all hissing and tape warble, but her mouth moved in rhythm. You could tell it was the same phrase, said in perfect time. Her hands were behind her back. Her feet didn't move an inch. On the chalkboard behind them, written in thick white chalk, were the words, "Rehearsal compliant, do not react." I let the scene play out. Nothing else happened for 5 minutes. Then the tape clicked and jumped backward. It restarted. Same entrance. Same blurred man. Same 5 students. But this time, the crying girl didn't cry. The second student, boy with buzzed hair, blinked once. That was the only change. A single then it looped again. Third run. The teacher looked at the camera once before going back to whispering. Her eyes dead flat. No eyebrows raised, no concern, just acknowledgement. Loop 4. The boy scratched the back of his hand. Nothing else changed. I was 6 loops in before I realized each one was almost identical, but not quite. Each time, a new deviation. Minor, small enough that someone watching on fast forward might miss it. But I saw them. A student glancing left, a mouth twitch, a shadow that wasn't there before. By the 8th loop, something happened that made my chest lock up. The girl in the red vest, the one who cried in the first version, stood up. It was sudden. The others stayed still. The man didn't move. The teacher kept whispering, but the girl stepped forward slowly, 3 paces toward the camera. then stopped. Her face was blank, but her mouth started moving, deliberately, soundless. She said something, 3 words. Lips moved slow enough that I could read it clear. This is still happening. Then the screen cut to static. Not even a clean end. Just that blizzard of noise, hard in the eyes and harder in the chest. My ears started ringing. I reached for the remote, but my hand was shaking. I hit rewind, watched it again. Same loop, same 3 words. I paused on her face. She looked so familiar. The shape of her cheeks, the way her bangs fell just a little crooked. I swear I'd seen that face before. I sat up and grabbed my phone, pulled up a browser, searched Capital Prep Student Uniform 2016, and scrolled for 20 minutes. News, photos, graduation galleries, archives, social media tags. Nothing. Not one image matched her. Then I searched her face on Google Lens. Nothing. No record, no name, no yearbook, no mention. It was like she'd never existed. I stood up to clear my head and caught something in the corner of my eye. Out the window across the street, the corner bodega had a new poster in the window. An ad for tutoring services. I couldn't see the full thing, just the top half from where I stood. But the girl on the poster, red vest, crooked bangs. I rushed out the door, ran down the stairs, nearly tripped on the last step. I got to the window and pressed my face against it. The poster was gone, just an ad for mango soda and discount phone cards. The old man behind the counter gave me a dirty look. I didn't care. My hands were shaking. I walked home with that static still in my ears. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing there in that room, mouth moving slow, like she was saying it again, but this time to me. Around 5 a.m., I gave up, took a shower, put on my work shirt, left early to beat the buses. When I got to the school, the morning sun barely touched the bricks. The air smelled like hot concrete and old gum. I rolled my card in, greeted the security guy like usual, made my way up to the 2nd floor to start sweeping. But when I got to my cart, something was off. Tucked into the side tray, folded neat and perfect, was the same envelope I saw in the storage closet, the moldy one addressed to the school board. Except now, it was clean, white as printer paper, no name, no stamp. And written in the corner, in red pen, was one word. Nope. I didn't put it there. I know that like I know my own name. I picked it up, held it like it might burn. Inside was a single index card. This is still happening? Classroom B4. I didn't even remember applying for the job. That's the part that kept tugging at the back of my mind like a loose thread. When the email showed up in my inbox, emergency coverage needed, Capital Prep Charter School, I just clicked it without thinking. I'd filled out so many applications over the last few months that the names blurred together. Substitute positions pop up fast and vanish faster. You say yes before the opportunity folds. That's how it works. But something about the way the email was worded stuck with me. It didn't say, please confirm. It just said, you've been assigned, as if I'd already agreed, as if they'd already known I would. It was my first time at Capital Prep. I'd heard about it, of course. Everyone in Harlem had, especially back when it opened in 2016. Big celebrity name behind it, banners on the subway, all the usual fluff about changing the game in urban education. But that was years ago. By the time I got there, it felt like the story had already ended, and nobody remembered to close the book. The building was beige and tall, with that tired public school architecture that always looked one earthquake away from a shutdown. A security guard waved me in with barely a glance. No ID check, just, they're expecting you, 3rd floor. The hallways smelled like dry erasers and too much floor wax. The lights buzzed faintly. Kids passed by without much noise, faces down, backpacks pressed to their sides like they were guarding something invisible. I signed in at the main office, and the secretary, a middle-aged woman with a gray bun and eyes that never quite looked at me, just handed me a folded paper. No greeting, no smile. The paper read, "Assignment, classroom B4, 3rd floor. Compliance period. 1 day." I paused. "I didn't see B4 listed on the room map downstairs," I said. She didn't answer, just looked past me, her hand already reaching for another paper. I took the hint and left. Classroom B4 was at the far end of the 3rd floor, past a series of doors labeled in fading gold paint. B1, B2, B3, then B4. No sign on the door, just a peeling black star sticker next to the knob. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. I'd taught in chaotic classrooms and silent ones, but this was something different. This silence didn't feel like obedience. It felt like absence. 12 students sat in uniform rows. No talking, no whispering. They weren't even doing anything, just staring at the blackboard. Not at me, not at their notebooks, just up. I followed their eyes. There was a box above the blackboard. It looked like a busted intercom, wrapped in black tape, wires dangling loosely from the side. It wasn't connected to anything anymore, or so I thought. "Good morning," I said. No one answered. "Let's take attendance." I went to the desk. There was no attendance sheet, no roster, just a stack of old-looking folders and a thick, dust-covered binder with the title, "Compliance Directives 2016, Intake Only." The cover was water-stained and torn at the edges. A sticker on the front read, "Cycle 2, Do Not Replicate." The binder. The first page was blank. The second page had a single line, "Do not speak outside of rehearsal hours." I closed the binder. Something about the way the room felt started to itch behind my eyes. I cleared my throat, tried again. "Let's start with some silent reading, all right? Just take out a book." No one moved. One girl, third desk in the second row, reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. She opened it and began writing slowly. Her hand moved across the page in long, smooth loops. I walked over to take a look. She was writing backwards. At first, I thought it was another language. Then I tilted my head and realized it was just English, reversed, like someone had mirrored the sentence. "Don't forget the hour." "Can I see that?" I asked, gently. She closed the notebook, her fingers tightened around it. "No, thank you," she said softly. It's the first voice I'd heard all morning. I stepped back. My heart was thudding louder than it should have been. I went back to the desk, sat down, and tried to breathe normally. The lights flickered once. I didn't think much of it. Old wiring, maybe. But when I glanced up, all 12 students were looking at me now, not blinking. Then the lights flickered again. "All right," I said, forcing a smile. "Let's move on." At exactly 2:16 p.m., the room changed. I know it was 2:16 because I checked my phone just before it happened, wondering how much longer I had left. Suddenly, every student froze, like a signal had hit them all at once. No blinking, no breathing sounds, even their chests stopped moving. I stood up. "Is everything okay?" No response. I walked slowly between the rows. Still nothing. I touched the shoulder of the boy in the back row. He didn't flinch. At 2:17 p.m., they all took a breath at once and started shuffling papers like nothing had happened. "What was that?" I asked. No one answered. I went straight to the main office after class. The secretary was gone. A different staff member sat at her desk now, some man I hadn't seen before, wearing a red lanyard with no name on it. "Excuse me," I said. I just finished my period in B4, but... He cut me off. There is no B4 on the 3rd floor, he said, without looking up. I froze. I just came from it. He tapped something on his keyboard. Room doesn't exist on the active roster. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. He looked up at me. His eyes were pale, unblinking. Anything else? He asked. No, I said. I left the building and walked halfway down the block before I realized I'd left my bag in the room. I turned around, ran back up the steps, through the lobby, and up to the 3rd floor. But the hallway was different. Where B4 had been, there was now a smooth stretch of wall, painted over, no door, no black star sticker. I stood there staring like an idiot, heart pounding. I ran my hand along the wall. Nothing. No seam, just cold drywall and a faint hum behind it, like an old radio left on too long. I left without my bag. That night, I tried to sleep, but the binder kept flashing in my head. Compliance directives, rehearsal hours. None of it made sense. I thought maybe I was overtired, maybe it was stress, maybe they'd done construction and moved things around. I told myself all kinds of things. But the next morning, I got an envelope under my apartment door. No postage, no name. Inside was a single sheet of paper. And do not break cycle. And folded inside it, smaller still, was a file label torn from a folder. Witness Compliance Classroom B4, Chapter 4, The Spiral Ledger. I wasn't looking for anything strange. I want to be clear about that from the beginning. My job is to verify grant allocation and vendor consistency across state-supported charter institutions, not play detective. Most days, it's boring. Mind-numbing spreadsheets, 30-tab Excel files, duplicate receipts filed under fake project titles. But every so often I run into something that doesn't add up, and when things don't add up in education finance, it usually means someone padded a lunch invoice or installed a $9,000 0-cents air conditioner they never plugged in. So when I first opened Capital Prep's 2016201 quarterly records, I wasn't expecting anything beyond maybe a budget misuse or two. What I found instead was a pattern, not a mistake, not even a clever fraud, a pattern. Intentional, coded, repeated, and buried so deep under paperwork, it took me 4 hours just to verify I wasn't hallucinating. It started with a line item I'd never seen before. Session materials, youth development, $71,412.00. Filed every month. Same amount. Never changing, never omitted. $71,412 each time, like clockwork. For context, that's more than double what most charter schools spend on academic supplies for the year. But what stuck out wasn't just the number, it was the vendors. Cross-referenced the payment destinations. Every invoice routed through a different LLC. Thinkfield Media, Lux Arbor Digital, Oculan Outreach. Names that looked clean on the surface, but one level deeper, and they all traced back to holding companies connected to entertainment contracts. Quiet shells registered out of Delaware and Nevada. The kind you only use when you don't want someone looking too closely. One of them, Horizon Track Inc., had a mailing address that matched a property owned by a record label that had previously been connected to Sean Combs. That's when I started screenshotting. Every file, every PO number. Because when patterns become too perfect, someone is always watching. I kept digging. Requested unredacted reports. Normally that involves a bureaucratic paper trail. I have to email the DOE's internal compliance branch and ask for the full set of quarterly disclosures. Most of the time, they come within a week. This time, I got a reply within 7 minutes. The file was already zipped. That never happens. The zip was password protected. The password came in a separate email with a subject line I'll never forget. Spiral access, tier 2 unfiltered. That's not normal DOE protocol. Tier 2 isn't a phrase we use in grant documentation. But I opened it anyway. The file inside wasn't a spreadsheet, it was a scanned memo, dated March 11th, 2017. Signed off with no name, no department. It read, "The children who remember must not rehearse out of order. Spiral 3 nearly activated during Phase 2. Contain deviations. Cycle must remain stable." At first, I didn't know what it meant. I figured maybe it was a joke, something internal, the way IT departments sometimes label folders "do not delete" or "God will cry," that sort of thing. But then I noticed something I'd missed earlier in the payment sheets. Certain invoices, only about once every 3 months, had an additional stamp in the notes field. Cycle 2/spiral variant approved. 3 different invoices, 3 different dates, each tied to an amount identical to the monthly $71,412.00 charge. I couldn't explain it. No educational vendor uses language like that. Cycle, variant, this wasn't curriculum development. This was something else. I tried to calm myself. I told myself I was overreacting, that this was just some odd language, maybe a consultant's way of tagging experimental projects. But it stuck with me. I couldn't let it go. I reached out to a colleague of mine in the Department of Education, Lauren. Smart, precise, reliable. She'd helped me red flag a tech fraud case the year before. I sent her a short note. Quick eyes needed on Capital Prep FY17. Check spiral variant invoices. You seeing what I'm seeing? No reply. I followed up the next morning. Still nothing. That afternoon I sent a third message. This time it bounced. Error 554. Address does not exist. I checked her name in our internal directory. Gone. Not listed. No email, no phone number, as if she'd never worked there. That's when my name stopped working too. Tried logging into the DOE backend. Credentials invalid. Tried resetting the password. Error message. I called our tech support line. They asked me for my badge number. I gave it. The man on the other end said that number's not registered. "I'm Maurice Ballard," I said. "Payroll ID 68,425. I've been with the department for 9 years. He paused. "I don't have a record of that name, sir." The call ended. I sat at my desk in the archive center, the quiet hum of the overhead lights pressing into my shoulders like invisible hands. The room felt different now, like it wasn't just storing records anymore, like it was watching who looked at them. I looked down at the stack of ledgers I'd been reviewing, thick books, each entry handwritten before the school switched to digital. 2016, 2017, 2018. I flipped to the final page of the 2017 book. My heart skipped. There, folded between the pages, was a sheet of lined paper. No, not paper. A drawing. Done in colored pencil. Crude, childlike, torn along the edge. It was of me, seated at this desk, wearing the same blue button-up shirt I had on today. Behind me on the wall was a calendar. 1 week from now, the date circled in red, and in the bottom right corner, written in shaky capital letters, "Spiral 4 starts when you forget who asked first." I dropped the paper. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just sat there, hands trembling. It wasn't possible. Someone was messing with me. Had to be. But then I looked at the margin of the ledger itself. Someone had scribbled a note in pencil along the edge of the page, barely visible unless you tilted it toward the light. Compliance confirmed. Variant 2 is aware. I closed the book. I looked around the archive center, empty, except it wasn't. I felt something shift behind the shelves. Not a sound, a presence. I shut down my terminal, gathered my things, walked out without logging the visit. When I got home, there was an envelope under my door. The same kind as the others. No address. No stamp. Just a single word scrawled across the front. Forget. Chapter 5. What the nurse saw. I didn't think I'd ever talk about Capital Prep again. Not out loud. Not to anyone who wasn't wearing a badge or pretending not to record. But here I am, 71 years old, sitting in this assisted living apartment with my ankles wrapped in a heating blanket and my knees aching from a life spent on linoleum floors, telling a stranger what I swore I'd take to my grave. Because he's locked up now, and because I keep dreaming of the girl with the red gloves, and I think she wants me to say it. My name's Ms. Linda Thompson. I was the school nurse at Capital Prep Charter from 2016 to 2018. I came in with the first batch of hires right after the big press tours ended and the glossy brochures stopped showing up. At first it felt like any other job, new faces, loud kids, scattered immunization records. But the first thing I noticed was how quiet the students were once the cameras left. Not just shy, quiet. Not even the kind of silence that comes with fear. This was trained, held, like they were taught that sound was a privilege. I remember the first student I ever treated was a boy who'd split his eyebrow during PE, not from a fall. He'd been hit. Hard. He wouldn't say who did it. Wouldn't say anything. Just stared at me, eyes watering, lip trembling, but no words. When I asked him to tell me where else it hurt, he started making these little hand gestures. Complex ones. Not ASL. My niece is deaf, and I know those signs. This was something else. His fingers moved fast, looping over one another, then pausing mid-air like punctuation. I thought maybe it was a behavior issue, but then I started seeing it more and more. Kids who didn't talk. Kids who sat at the edge of the cot and folded their arms into spirals on their laps. Kids who hummed without opening their mouths. Girls who flinched when you offered them Band-Aids. Boys who kept their shoes tied 3 times over like they were scared something would crawl in. There was one girl I'll never forget. She wore red gloves every single day, kept them on even during her physical. Said her hands were cold, even in June. When I asked her to remove them, she looked me in the eye and whispered. Bai told me the prints don't reset if I keep them on. I asked who they were and she said, the ones from upstairs, the rehearsal ones. She was 8. The worst part was the bruises. Not because they existed, I've worked in rough schools. Bruises happen, but these were patterned, repeating. Like the mark of something metal, something thin and evenly spaced. I once saw bruises on a boy's back that looked like the spacing between fork prongs. 4 of them, perfectly straight, lined across his shoulder blade. When I asked him how it happened, he shrugged and said, I broke scene. I didn't understand what that meant. None of it made sense, until the consultants started showing up. Every Friday afternoon, a black SUV would park outside the west entrance. A man and a woman in dark business attire would come in. No badges, no IDs. The front office never made announcements. The staff never acknowledged them. But students were taken. Not all of them, just a few, usually the same ones. They'd walk out with blank faces, holding folders marked Cycle Prep or Echo Variant. When they came back, they were different, quiet in a different way, still like photos. Too still. One time, I asked one of the consultants for a signature after a student returned with fresh lacerations under his shirt. The man smiled at me like I'd just told a joke he didn't get. He signed rehearsal witness compliant tier and walked off. I kept records. That was my way of fighting back, I guess. Little notepads I'd slide under the filing cabinet. Copies of incident reports I emailed to myself at home. Photos of the bruises I took with a disposable camera because I didn't trust the school's tech. I filed a formal complaint with the district in January of 2018. Spent weeks crafting the wording. Included dates, names, photos, everything. I sent it off. 3 days later, my inbox was wiped. My employee access badge stopped working. They said it was a system error, but my name was already off the staff roster. I got called into the office by a board representative, some man I'd never seen before. He wore a beige suit and spoke without blinking. He handed me a manila envelope and said, "Cycle continuation agreement. Sign this and you'll be rehired under Tier 1 witness compliance." I opened it. First line, "I acknowledge that the events observed were rehearsals and not real." I walked out. That was my last day. I moved into assisted living last year. My body's not what it used to be, and I figured it was better than waiting to fall over alone. I brought only a few things with me. One box was full of drawings, sketches students gave me. Some I asked for, some I didn't. They're all spirals. Spirals drawn over cafeteria tables, over courtrooms, over rooms labeled Echo Hall. One girl drew herself with her mouth sewn shut, holding up a sign that said, "Do not direct your own line." I kept them in a folder in my closet behind the winter coats. The interviewer, I won't say her name because she said not to, found me through a name I once signed on a FOIA request. She said she'd been tracking erased faculty records. She said my name showed up in a file labeled Dormantier. She asked me if I wanted to talk. I said yes. I don't know why. Maybe because I keep waking up to the same dream. The girl in the red gloves. She stands at the foot of my bed and just watches. She doesn't move, but she leaves something behind every time. This morning it was a napkin with a spiral drawn in grape jelly. Yesterday it was a fork with the tips filed down. Last week it was a piece of masking tape across my closet door. I didn't put it there. Before the interviewer left, I gave her something. A note. I'd kept it hidden inside the back of my medical ledger. One of the kids gave it to me just before she vanished. Her name was Nessa, I think. Or maybe it wasn't. Names weren't always real in that school. The note said, "If you draw it enough, they won't rehearse it again. But if you forget, they return." I don't draw, but I remember. And maybe that's why they haven't come back for me yet. Chapter 6. Session 7 was missing. Began transcript. Witness. No. 374. See Capitol Preparatory Board Deposition. Sealed. Room 2. AA. May 16, 2025. 9:47 IEM. Legal counsel. Let the record show that this is a voluntary deposition under seal conditions. The witness is present under full immunity as granted by the State Compliance Agreement, Clause 12. Witness, please confirm your current name and role at the time of employment with Capitol Preparatory Harlem. Witness, I decline to state my name on record. I served on the Internal Curriculum Board between 2015 and 2019. My clearance designation was Tier 2 Intake Oversight. Legal counsel, understood. We will refer to you as Witness 374C. You are here to provide information related to the educational structure known internally as the Cycle Learning Framework. Is that correct? Witness. Yes. Legal counsel, was this framework tied to the school's public curriculum? Witness. No, it ran parallel, internally approved. Off-roster. Legal counsel, and who authorized its implementation? Witness, the founder, Sean Combs. His team initiated the framework under a directive labeled Cycle Intake Variant 1. He signed off on every session rubric between 2016 and late 2017. Legal counsel, you're stating, on record, that Mr. Combs approved an alternative education system not disclosed to the DOE or state regulatory boards? Witness, it wasn't education. It was behavioral rehearsal, memory alignment protocols. That's how it was phrased. The language was intentionally vague. Legal counsel, let's discuss the sessions. There were 8. Witness, yes, each referred to as a cycle variant. They were assigned by year group, but only sessions 1 through 6 were stable. Session 8 was never launched. Session 7 broke. Legal counsel, broke. Witness, it collapsed. We called it disintegrated. On paper it was redacted entirely, but the effects lingered. The students, those placed in that session, began displaying recursive memory behaviors, drawing classrooms they hadn't been in, repeating scripted lines during actual conversations, referring to incidents that hadn't happened yet. Legal counsel, you're describing false memories? Witness, no, I'm describing forward leakage, a collapse in memory containment. They began to anticipate corrections before being disciplined. One child submitted an assignment a full week before it was distributed. Another walked into the principal's office before being called. There was a sense of internal rehearsal. The children started looping ahead. Legal counsel, and this is tied to session 7. Witness, it was the only session that ran more than 5 times. Each time it got messier, the lines blurred, staff started absorbing it. A substitute broke protocol and asked a student if they remembered her. The child said, "You're not real this time." The sub went on leave and never returned. Legal counsel, where is the documentation? Witness, you won't find it in the public files. There's a locked archive on the basement level, labeled Session 7 Recovery Plan. Inside, trauma assessments, waiver signatures, sealed affidavits from instructors. But the core files, video, logs, review memos, those were marked non-retentive and shredded. Legal counsel, shredded under whose authority? Witness, the compliance director. She wore a badge with a spiral insignia. I never learned her name. Was the Department of Education aware? Witness, no, the school provided clean audits. We created shadow rosters. Children in Session 7 were listed as out of district for legal shielding. Legal counsel, these are serious violations. Did any other board members object? Witness, one did. He left, died within 6 months. The others either signed cycle continuation or were reassigned to media development branches. Legal counsel, describe the term leaking. What does that mean in this context? Witness, memory bleeding. Session 7 material wasn't staying contained. Children who weren't in that group began drawing similar symbols. Staff dreamed the same dream, a classroom where no one speaks, only watches. We found one girl, age 9, standing outside the storage closet at 3:00 a.m. She'd written cycle overlaps detected on her own arm in red marker. The ink wasn't hers. Legal counsel, do you have documentation of that incident? Witness, it was wiped. Compliance agents arrived that morning, took the incident report. The closet was sealed with thermal tape. Anyone who asked was told the hallway had a leak. Legal counsel, did the school ever consider shutting the cycle program down? Witness, you don't shut down a loop. You either finish it or let it break you. Legal counsel, I'm sorry? Witness, that's what the filers said. I remember it clearly. You don't shut down a loop. You either finish it or let it break you. Handwritten, on a post-it stuck to the Session 7 desk. Legal counsel, let me refocus. Have you ever experienced symptoms of memory distortion yourself? Witness, yes. Legal counsel, describe them. Witness, I woke up once with a court diagram drawn on my palm. It was pencil. It wiped off after a few minutes. I hadn't drawn it. My handwriting is small. This was a child's. Another time, I wrote an email to the DOE and found I'd typed, "This is the rehearsal. Watch what you forget," 42 times in the body field. Legal counsel, did you seek medical attention? Witness, no. I was warned that memory contamination was part of the risk. The contract I signed had a clause, Rehearsal drift acceptable within Tier 2 observers. Legal counsel. That clause was approved by who? Witness, I can't say. Legal counsel. Or you won't. Witness, I don't remember anymore. That's not evasion. That's what happens when Session 7 runs too long. Legal counsel. One final question. Do you believe you are still under influence from the session material? Witness, may I borrow a pen? Legal counsel, for the record, the witness is being provided a writing implement. Witness, thank you. Legal counsel, the witness has drawn a child's face, smiling. No eyes. A spiral in the mouth. Legal counsel, is this a representation of one of the students? Witness, no. That's me, the missing locker. I didn't break into Capitol Prep to cause trouble. I broke in because my little brother never came home. His name was Jalen, 4 years younger than me, always sketching cartoons in the margins of his homework. He loved lemon cookies and hated science class. In fall of 2020, they told us he transferred schools. But no school ever called to request his records. No welcome email, no bus schedule. Nothing. They just said he's been reassigned. And that was it, reassigned like he was a package, not a person. Our mom called every number they gave her. They stopped picking up after a week. Then someone from the district told her she must have misunderstood. He was never officially enrolled, they said. That's when she broke down. That's when I started digging. The records were wrong, all of them. His name was missing from rosters. His student ID didn't scan anymore. Photos of him in the yearbook were blurred out, literally. One was replaced with a completely different kid. Same shirt, different face. I checked our own hard copies at home. They'd changed too. I didn't tell Mom. She already thought she was going crazy. So last night, I went back to the school. Alone. I still had my old ID from when I was a student there, class of 2017. Still had the uniform sweater too. I figured if I looked like I belonged, the night sensors wouldn't trip as fast. The building looked the same, but not. The front entrance was locked, chain looped around the handles like it hadn't been opened in weeks. I circled around the back. The west stairwell door had always been janky. It popped open if you tugged hard enough and leaned just right. I stepped inside and felt it immediately, that pressure. The air was heavier than it should have been, like the school was holding its breath. The halls were lit by those sickly overhead fluorescents that never stopped buzzing. Everything echoed weird, like the sound didn't want to stay where it came from. I went to the 3rd floor. Jalen's last homeroom was up there, room 3C, but I wasn't looking for a classroom. I was looking for locker 1017. That number had come to me in a dream. I know that sounds stupid, but I saw it written in chalk on the back of my eyelids when I slept. I saw Jalen pointing at it. He didn't say a word, just pointed. I turned down the hallway. The lockers stood in perfect lines like soldiers. Most of them were closed and dusty, the kind of dusty that doesn't settle naturally, like the air itself wanted to forget they existed. I walked until I found it. 117. It was clean, unnaturally clean, like someone had wiped it down that day. I touched the handle. It was cold, too cold. It opened without resistance. Inside was a stack of papers tied with black string, a small manila envelope, and a silver flash drive taped to the back wall with a label that read, "Play during verdict." I didn't know what that meant. I untied the string from the stack of papers. They were drawings, childlike, crayon, pencil, graphite smudged under small thumbs. All of them had spirals, not just drawn in the center, but as frames, borders, repeating patterns around cafeterias, classrooms, faceless adults. One had a courtroom with students in every seat and a teacher on trial. Another had a hallway with no doors, just eyes, watching. Each drawing had a stamp on the back. Spiral practice, phase 3. I stuffed them in my bag, then took the flash drive. I had no laptop. My phone couldn't run it. I thought about leaving, but I needed to see it. I needed to know. So I went down to the library. The door was unlocked. The lights flickered awake like they were surprised to see someone. The room smelled like dust and dried glue. I sat at the central computer, logged in using a test student ID I remembered from senior year. Still worked. I plugged in the drive. There was one video file, no title, just a time code. I clicked it. The screen stayed black for 5 seconds, then a figure appeared. It was an adult, wearing a plain black mask with no holes. The mask was smooth, reflective, almost glossy. They stood in front of a chalkboard that read, "Cycle breaker orientation. Silence is compliance." The voice was male, filtered, tinny, like it was playing through an old speaker. "It isn't the principal, he's the rehearsal." Pause. "Don't memorize his face, memorize your silence." Pause. "If you draw it, you delay it. If you speak it, you summon it. If you forget it, you become it." Behind him, on the chalkboard, a crude sketch started forming on its own. It was of students, 4 of them, standing behind a 5th who sat with a blindfold. The speaker raised his hand and pointed at the camera. "Playback is judgment. Watch carefully. The cycle will know when you've looked away." The screen glitched. The sound warped into static. Then the lights in the library went out. Total blackout. Monitors, ceiling lights, everything. I froze. My breath was loud in the silence. Then I heard a footstep outside the library. Not fast, not panicked, just slow. 2. Then keys jangling. Security. I yanked the flash drive out and shoved it in my pocket. I grabbed my bag and sprinted for the back exit. My heart slammed against my ribs. I didn't even look back. I just ran. Down the hall, past the lockers, past the janitor cart that hadn't moved in years. I ducked through the stairwell and burst out the side door into the alley. Kept running until my lungs gave out. When I finally got home, I dumped everything on the bed. Drawings. The flash drive. The envelope I almost forgot. I opened the envelope last. Inside was a single sketch. Drawn in pencil. It was of me, standing in the hallway, facing locker 117. Drawn from behind. My stance, my hair, my jacket. All right. But the date on the bottom, tomorrow, Chapter 8, playback pending. I'd worked the Federal Archive unit for 7 years, long enough to know that sealed exhibits rarely come with warnings. They arrive late, half-cataloged, usually in dented boxes packed by overpaid interns and signed with initials no one can trace. My job wasn't exciting. It was endurance work. Scan, file, review, repeat. Government documentation ages like cement, slow, immovable, and always gray. But the package I opened that morning wasn't like the others. No sender, no tracking slip, just a black envelope with a wax seal I had to cut away with scissors. Inside, a single mini tape cartridge and a typed note that read, "Cycle breaker evidence, audio sync required." It didn't include a case number, no docket reference, no associated trial or court date, just that phrase. I sat with it for a moment, trying to figure out which shelf it had been misrouted from. Most of our sealed exhibits come from family court or white-collar compliance, nothing that needs audio sync. But something about the tape felt off in my hand. Too warm, as if someone had just sealed it moments before. I connected the playback module, switched to internal routing, and ran the tape through our audio terminal. The screen flickered black. Then the feed stabilized. Audio began in layers, disjointed, static overlapping with breathy recordings of what sounded like children practicing statements. Their voices were flat, reciting in near unison. I remember because I was told to remember. My testimony is compliant, my silence is controlled. Then another voice joined, an adult, female. An administrator's tone, firm, practiced. This exhibit has been reviewed and sealed under Spiral Directive 3. Rehearsal deviations must be erased from auditory review. I paused the tape. I'd never heard any federal directive referred to as spiral anything. I did a quick internal database search. Nothing came up. No such case. No such label. I checked the physical folder that had arrived with the envelope. There was a student's sketch inside. Dozens of them, actually. Each on thin paper, like pages torn from a child's journal. Spiral patterns. Courtroom tables drawn in crayon. Hallways without doors. Children standing on desks. Arms raised in unnatural shapes like puppet limbs mid-stroke. One drawing showed a nurse with red gloves, standing behind a classroom full of silent children. Another showed a hallway locker, number 117, with an eye drawn on the lock. But the final drawing stopped me. It was of me, sitting at my terminal, headphones on, watching the tape. Drawn from behind, in charcoal pencil, my desk, my posture. Even the chipped corner on the monitor was sketched exactly. Below the sketch were 5 words in red ink. Verdict rendered, playback pending. I looked up. The office lights above me flickered, just once, long enough for my reflection to twitch in the screen. I tried to eject the tape. The terminal froze. Then typed on its own. You processed the evidence. Now you remember it. Welcome to session 9. I yanked the plug from the terminal. The screen stayed on. The tape kept playing. The children's voices layered again, only now they weren't just reciting. They were humming, not a tune, something closer to static, filtered through a dream. I covered my ears, stepped back, but I still heard them. Not through the terminal, through the room itself. I turned to leave, but the archive door wouldn't budge. I was locked in. I hit the emergency switch, no response. The hallway outside flickered on the surveillance screen, and I saw it. A figure standing at the end of the hall, unmoving, masked. The screen flickered, and changed. It showed an empty courtroom, but every seat had a child in it. One of them raised a hand. Then the screen cut to black. On my desk, the printer activated. I hadn't touched it. A single page slid out. On it, a spiral. Crude. Messy. Drawn in shaky graphite. In a line beneath, you were never watching a school. You were watching a loop, and now it's your rehearsal. I took a step back. On the wall behind my terminal, something had been written. I hadn't seen it before. I don't know when it appeared, but the words stretched across the drywall like a sentence mid-seminary. Memory is the curse. Schools don't forget. Fallible, they replicate. I don't know how long I stood there. Hours, maybe. The system finally powered down on its own. When the lights stopped flickering, the door unlocked without sound. I walked out. I tried to file a report. The file corrupted before I could save it. I tried to email a supervisor. My account had been disabled. When I came back the next day, the terminal was gone. My desk was empty. No one remembered me being assigned to that case. But in the staff break room, on the corkboard above the safety manual, someone had pinned a drawing. A courtroom filled with children. One of them was me.